I came home from work on a Tuesday afternoon in March to find my 100-year-old oak tree lying in pieces across my front yard in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. The tree had been there when I bought the house 3 years ago, a magnificent sprawling giant that provided shade over half my property and kept my air conditioning bills reasonable during the brutal southern summers. Now it was firewood, and standing in my driveway with her arms crossed and a satisfied expression on her face was Patricia Winters, president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. My name is Stephen Nelson, and I'm a software engineer who moved to Charlotte for work after spending most of my life in Colorado. I bought my house specifically because of that tree. The realtor had even mentioned it as a selling point, calling it a heritage oak that added at least $20,000 to the property value. I had pictures of that tree from every season, and I'd spent countless weekend mornings drinking coffee on my porch while listening to birds nested in its branches. "What the hell happened here?" I demanded, dropping my laptop bag on the driveway and staring at the destruction. There were 2 men with chainsaws still working on cutting up the larger branches, and a wood chipper was running loudly near the street. Patricia turned to face me with that particular expression I'd come to recognize over the past 3 years, the one that said she was about to explain why she was right and I was wrong about something. She was maybe 55, with short blonde hair that looked like she'd just come from the salon, and she wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Stephen, finally." "I've been trying to reach you all day," she said, raising her voice over the sound of the wood chipper. "Your tree was in violation of HOA Code Section 12.7. It extended more than 15 feet over the property line into the common area, and the roots were causing damage to the sidewalk. I had it removed this morning." I felt my face getting hot despite the cool March air. "You had my tree removed without even talking to me about it first." "I sent you 3 letters over the past month," Patricia said, pulling a folder from under her arm. "You were given ample opportunity to address the violation yourself. Since you failed to take action, the HOA exercised its right to remedy the situation and bill you for the cost." "I never got any letters," I said, walking closer to inspect the damage. The tree service had cut the oak down to a stump that stuck up maybe 2 feet from the ground. The entire canopy that had shaded my house was gone. My yard looked naked and wrong. "And even if you sent letters, you can't just come onto my property and cut down my tree. Actually, according to the CC and Articus you signed when you purchased your home, the HOA has the right to enter your property to address violations after proper notice has been given. And I have certified mail receipts showing that you received all 3 letters." She held up some papers, waving them slightly. I grabbed them from her hand and looked at the signatures. They didn't look anything like my signature, just some scrawled initials. "This isn't my signature." "The Postal Service says otherwise," Patricia replied with a thin smile. "Now, the tree removal cost $1,800, and you'll be receiving a bill from the HOA within the week. I suggest you pay it promptly to avoid late fees and potential liens on your property." The chainsaw operator nearest to me shut off his saw and pulled out his earplugs. "Hey lady, we're done here. Where do you want us to haul the wood?" "Take it all," Patricia said. "The homeowner won't be needing it." "Wait," I said, holding up my hand. "I want the wood." "That's a 100-year-old oak. That's quality hardwood." The tree service guy shrugged. "Fine with me, but you'll need to stack it yourself. We're just contracted for cutting and hauling." "Actually," Patricia interjected, "the contract specifies complete removal. The wood goes with you." "The hell it does," I said. "This is my property and my tree, or it was my tree until you illegally cut it down. That wood stays here. Patricia's expression hardened. Stephen, I understand you're upset, but throwing a tantrum won't change the facts. You were in violation. Proper notice was given and the tree has been removed. If you want to keep the wood, that's between you and the tree service, but either way, you're paying for the removal. I'm not paying for anything, I said, my voice rising. You had no right to do this. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Patricia said calmly. I have all the documentation right here. The police will tell you this is a civil matter between you and the HOA. Now I have another appointment to get to. Please have your payment to the HOA office by next Friday. She turned and walked to her silver Lexus SUV parked on the street, got in, and drove away. I stood there in my destroyed yard, watching the tree service guys finish loading chunks of my oak tree into their truck, feeling a rage building inside me that I hadn't experienced in years. I did call the police. An officer showed up about 20 minutes later, a young guy named Officer Martinez who looked at my driver's license, listened to my story, looked at the stump, and basically told me exactly what Patricia had predicted. Sir, this is a civil matter, he said, closing his notepad. If you believe the HOA acted improperly, you'll need to contact a lawyer. I can't arrest someone for cutting down a tree, especially if they're claiming they had the legal right to do it. They didn't have the right, I insisted. They forged my signature on certified mail receipts. That's something you'll need to prove in court, Officer Martinez said. I'm sorry about your tree, but there's nothing I can do here. You should definitely talk to a lawyer, though. After he left, I went inside and started making calls. The first lawyer I reached was a general practice attorney who listened to my story and told me he didn't handle HOA disputes, but could refer me to someone who did. The second lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Chen who specialized in property law, agreed to meet with me the next morning. That evening, I sat on my porch and stared at the empty space where my tree had been. My yard got full afternoon sun now, beating down on the house and making the interior uncomfortably warm, even with the air conditioning running. I could see straight through to my neighbor's yard on the other side, and they could see mine. The privacy the tree had provided was completely gone. My phone rang around 8. It was my neighbor from 3 houses down, Robert Hayes, a retired accountant who I sometimes chatted with at the neighborhood pool. Stephen, I just heard about your oak tree. I'm so sorry, man. That's terrible. Yeah, Patricia decided to have it removed today while I was at work, I said. Listen, I don't know if this helps, but I saw the tree service guys here around 7 this morning. I thought it was weird because I never saw you outside talking to them or anything. Patricia was here directing everything. Did you see them deliver any letters to my house over the past month? I asked. Letters? No, I can't say I have, but I'm not always looking out the window or anything. If you remember anything else, let me know. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Good luck with that. Patricia has gotten sued before, you know. She always seems to come out on top, though. The HOA has deep pockets for legal fees. That wasn't encouraging, but I wasn't about to let this go. I spent the rest of the evening taking pictures of the stump, the damage to my yard, and looking up the value of mature oak trees. What I found shocked me. A heritage oak like mine could be worth anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 in terms of property value, and replacing it would cost tens of thousands even if I could find a mature tree to transplant. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through conversations I wanted to have with Patricia, arguments I wanted to make, ways I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her power-tripping HOA presidency. The next morning, I took the day off work and drove to Jennifer Chen's office in downtown Charlotte. Her office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower with a view of the city skyline, and she met me in a conference room with a yellow legal pad and a recording device. "Tell me everything," she said after introducing herself. She was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes behind black framed glasses. I walked her through the whole story, from coming home to find the tree gone to Patricia's explanation about violations and certified letters to the police officer's response. Jennifer took notes and asked questions. "You have your copy of the CC and Artiques?" she asked. "Yeah, they gave me a copy at closing. I haven't looked at them in years, though. Bring them to me. I'll need to review them carefully. Also, I want you to go to the post office and get copies of those certified mail receipts if you can. I want to see exactly what they look like and who signed for them." Patricia showed me papers with some scribbled signature that definitely wasn't mine. "Good. That's potentially mail fraud, which is a federal crime, but we'll need to prove it." Jennifer tapped her pen against her pad. "Here's what I'm thinking. If the HOA violated proper procedure, which it sounds like they did, you have grounds for a lawsuit. At minimum, they'd be liable for the value of the tree, the cost of replacement and restoration of your landscaping. Depending on how this plays out, we might also be able to argue for punitive damages, especially if we can prove they forged documents." "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "For a 100-year-old heritage oak, conservatively, I'd say $30,000 to $40,000 for the tree itself. Replacement and landscaping could be another $30,000 to $50,000 depending on what we can source. Legal fees would be separate, but if we win, we can often get those awarded as well." I felt a grim satisfaction at those numbers. So Patricia and her HOA might be on the hook for almost $100,000. Potentially more if we pursue punitive damages. But Stephen, I need to be honest with you. These cases can drag on for months or even years. The HOA will have their own lawyers and they'll fight this. It's going to be stressful and time-consuming. "I don't care," I said. "She cut down my tree. She did it deliberately and smugly. I want her to pay for it." Jennifer nodded. "Okay then, let's start building your case. I'll need you to get me those documents, and I'm going to start drafting a demand letter to the HOA. We'll try to settle this without going to court if possible, but be prepared for litigation." I left her office feeling better than I had since coming home to find my tree destroyed. I drove straight to the post office and asked to speak with a supervisor about certified mail. The woman behind the counter, whose name tag read Doris, listened to my story and pulled up the records on her computer. "Okay, I see 3 certified letters sent to your address from Meadowbrook Hills HOA over the past 6 weeks, Doris said, squinting at the screen. "They show as delivered and signed for." "Can I see the signatures?" I asked. She printed out copies of the delivery confirmations. The signatures were just illegible scrawls, nothing like my actual signature. On one of them, I could make out what looked like the letters SN, but they could have been anything. "This isn't my signature on any of these," I said. "Someone else signed for these letters." Doris frowned. "Do you have anyone else living at your address? Family members?" "No, I live alone." Well, sometimes if you're not home, a neighbor can sign for certified mail if the carrier knows them, or the carrier might have made a mistake with the signature." "Is there any way to find out who actually signed for these?" "You need to file a formal complaint with the postal inspector. They can investigate, but I have to tell you, these things don't always get resolved quickly." I took the copies of the delivery confirmations and thanked her. On my way out, I stopped at a FedEx office and made multiple copies of everything, then drove back home. My yard looked even worse in the midday sun. The grass where the tree had shaded, it was already starting to look pale, and I could see the bare dirt where the tree service had driven their equipment across my lawn. I spent an hour taking more detailed photographs from every angle, making sure to capture the damage and the stump. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s standing there with a clipboard. She introduced herself as Bethany Crane, the HOA secretary. "I'm here to do a compliance inspection of your property," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You're kidding me, right?" I said, "You people just cut down my tree yesterday, and now you want to inspect my property." "It's a routine quarterly inspection, Mr. Nelson. All properties in Meadowbrook Hills get inspected 4 times a year." The timing seems awfully convenient. Bethany shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just doing my job. Can I access your backyard?" "No," I said flatly. "You can inspect what's visible from the street, but you're not coming onto my property. I'm in the middle of a legal dispute with the HOA, and I'm not letting anyone back there without my lawyer present." "The CC and Articus give the HOA the right to inspect. I know what they say," I interrupted. "And I'm telling you no. If Patricia wants to push this, she can explain to a judge why she needed to inspect my backyard the day after she illegally cut down my tree." Bethany's face flushed. "It wasn't illegal. She followed proper procedure. We'll see what the court says about that." She made some notes on her clipboard and left. I watched her walk around to the side of my house, trying to peer into the backyard, and then take pictures of my front yard with her phone before getting into her car and driving away. I immediately called Jennifer Chen and told her what had happened. She sighed audibly over the phone. "They're building a file against you," she said. "Looking for any violations they can use as leverage or to make you look bad. Document everything. Take pictures of your entire property, especially anything they might claim is a violation, and don't let them onto your property without me present." That's what I told her. "Good. I'm drafting the demand letter now. I should have it ready to send tomorrow. In the meantime, I want you to get estimates from at least 3 tree services about the cost of replacing your oak with the largest specimen they can source and transport. Also get estimates for repairing your lawn and any other landscaping damage." Over the next 3 days, I had 5 different tree services come out to look at my property. The estimates were sobering. The largest oak tree any of them could source and transplant was about 30 years old, maybe 20 feet tall with a 6-inch trunk diameter. Nothing close to what I'd lost. The cheapest estimate was $38,000. The most expensive was $62,000. And every single arborist told me the same thing. A 30-year-old transplanted oak would probably not survive the stress of being moved. And even if it did, it would take years to recover and start growing normally again. "Really, what you lost is irreplaceable," said the 4th arborist, a grizzled man named Tom Stevens who'd been in the tree business for 40 years. "A 100-year-old oak like that, there's no amount of money that brings that back. You can plant a new tree and wait 100 years, or you can transplant a younger tree and hope it survives, but you'll never have what you had." "Can you write that in your estimate?" I asked. "Sure can. I've testified in a few cases like this. HOAs and utilities cutting down heritage trees without understanding what they're destroying. I'll give you a detailed write-up." Tom's estimate came in at $45,000 for a transplanted oak, plus another $8,000 for other landscaping work to restore my yard. His written report was 6 pages long, detailing the value of what I'd lost and the inadequacy of any replacement. I sent all the estimates to Jennifer, along with the documents from the post office and pictures of every inch of my property. That Friday, 1 week after Patricia had my tree cut down, Jennifer sent a formal demand letter to the HOA. The letter was beautiful. It laid out the facts, cited specific laws Patricia had violated, included the doctored certified mail signatures as evidence of fraud, and demanded payment of $75,000 for the tree replacement and landscaping, plus $15,000 for my legal fees to date. It gave the HOA 14 days to respond. I didn't hear anything from Patricia or the HOA for 10 days. Then, on a Monday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing there with a man in an expensive suit. "Stephen, this is Harold Mitchell, the HOA's attorney," Patricia said. Her voice was tight, and she didn't look nearly as confident as she had standing in my driveway watching my tree get cut down. "We'd like to discuss your demand letter." "I have an attorney for that," I said. "You should talk to her." "We've tried calling her," Harold said. "She's not returning our calls. We'd really like to settle this amicably without involving the courts." "Probably should have thought of that before you cut down my tree." Patricia's expression hardened. "Stephen, you're being unreasonable. The tree was a legitimate violation." "We followed procedure. You forged my signature on mail receipts," I said. "That's mail fraud. That's a federal crime. My lawyer has the evidence." "Now wait just a minute," Harold said, holding up his hand. "Nobody forged anything. Those letters were delivered to your address and someone signed for them. If it wasn't you, maybe you should figure out who it was. I live alone, and I was at work when those letters were supposedly delivered. So either your client forged the signatures herself, or she had someone else do it. Either way, it's fraud." "You can't prove that," Patricia snapped. "Actually, we probably can," I said. "My lawyer has already filed a complaint with the postal inspector. They're investigating. If they find evidence of fraud, this becomes a criminal matter, not just a civil lawsuit." Harold and Patricia exchanged a look. Harold cleared his throat. "What would it take to make this go away?" $75,000 for replacement and landscaping, $15,000 for legal fees, and a formal written apology from Patricia and the HOA board admitting wrongdoing. Plus Patricia resigns as HOA president. "That's absurd," Patricia said, her face reddening. "I'm not resigning. I haven't done anything wrong." "Then I'll see you in court," I said, and closed the door. I heard them arguing on my porch for a minute before they left. I immediately called Jennifer and told her about the conversation. "They're scared," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "The mail fraud angle has them worried." "Good. Don't talk to them again without me present. All communication goes through me from now on." 2 days later, I received a formal response from Harold Mitchell. The HOA was offering to pay $20,000 and admitting no wrongdoing. Patricia would not resign. Jennifer sent back a counteroffer: $65,000 for the tree and landscaping, $10,000 for legal fees, written apology, and Patricia resigns. The offer was good for 72 hours. They rejected it. We filed the lawsuit the following Monday, 3 weeks after my tree had been cut down. The legal process moved slowly. We filed in Mecklenburg County Superior Court, and the HOA had 30 days to respond. They filed a motion to dismiss, claiming the CC and Articus gave them authority to remove the tree, and that I'd been properly notified. Jennifer filed a response brief that was 23 pages long, citing case law about property rights, the value of heritage trees, and the evidence of fraudulent mail receipts. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. We were going to trial. Discovery began, which meant both sides could request documents and take depositions. Jennifer subpoenaed all HOA records related to my property, including meeting minutes, correspondence, and financial records. She also subpoenaed Patricia's personal emails and text messages. What we found was damning. In the HOA board meeting minutes from 2 months before my tree was cut down, there was a discussion about problem properties in the neighborhood. Mine was listed as one of them, not because of the tree, but because I'd filed a complaint 6 months earlier about Patricia's husband parking his boat in their driveway in violation of HOA rules. Patricia had dismissed my complaint, saying the boat was only there temporarily, but it had sat in their driveway for 2 months before they finally moved it. In her text messages, we found conversations with other board members where she specifically mentioned my property and said she was going to find violations to shut him up. One text message, sent 2 weeks before the tree was removed, said, "Found the perfect violation. His oak tree technically extends over the property line. Going to have it removed and make him pay for it. Serves him right for causing trouble." Jennifer was ecstatic when she showed me these messages. "This proves malicious intent," she said. "She didn't remove your tree because it was a legitimate violation. She did it to retaliate against you for filing a complaint about her husband. That opens up punitive damages." We also found that Patricia had personally signed for the certified letters at the post office using my address, claiming she was accepting mail on behalf of a neighbor who wasn't home. The postal inspector's investigation had uncovered this through interviews with the postal carrier and video footage from inside the post office showing Patricia signing the receipts. This was bad enough that the postal inspector referred the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential prosecution. Patricia was now facing possible federal charges for mail fraud. The depositions were scheduled for 6 weeks before the trial date. I had to take a day off work to sit in a conference room while Harold Mitchell asked me questions for 3 hours about everything from when I bought my house to how often I watered my lawn. Jennifer sat next to me and objected to about a third of his questions. Then it was Patricia's turn to be deposed. Jennifer conducted the deposition, and I was allowed to be present. Patricia showed up in a navy blue dress suit, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked confident and composed. That lasted about 20 minutes. Jennifer walked Patricia through the timeline of events, and Patricia stuck to her story. The tree was a violation, proper notice was given. The HOA had the authority to remove it. Then Jennifer brought out the text messages. "Can you explain this text message to board member Bethany Crane where you wrote, 'Going to have it removed and make him pay for it. Serves him right for causing trouble.'" Patricia's face went pale. That was taken out of context." "What context would make that message not indicate retaliatory intent?" "I meant that he'd been causing trouble by ignoring the violation notices." "But Mr. Nelson never received any violation notices, did he, Mrs. Winters? Because you signed for them yourself at the post office." "I was just trying to help. I knew he wasn't home during the day. Did Mr. Nelson give you permission to accept his mail?" "No, but the postal worker. Did you represent yourself as someone authorized to accept Mr. Nelson's mail?" "I told them I was his neighbor and I'd make sure he got it." "But you never actually gave him the letters, did you?" Patricia didn't answer. "Mrs. Winters, did you give Mr. Nelson the certified letters you signed for?" "I don't recall." Jennifer pulled out more documents. "According to the postal inspector's report, you signed for all 3 certified letters on the same day they were sent to the post office for delivery. You went to the post office that same day and claimed them. How did you know the letters had been sent to Mr. Nelson?" Patricia's lawyer Harold interrupted. "Don't answer that." "I'll rephrase," Jennifer said calmly. "Mrs. Winters, as the HOA president, did you order those letters to be sent?" "Yes." "So you sent the letters, then immediately went to the post office and intercepted them before they could be delivered to Mr. Nelson." "I object to the characterization," Harold said. "My client did not intercept anything. What would you call it when someone signs for certified mail addressed to another person without that person's knowledge or permission? The deposition went on like that for 2 more hours. By the end, Patricia was flustered and angry, and her story had more holes than Swiss cheese. Harold called for several breaks to confer with his client, but the damage was done. We also deposed the other board members, including Bethany Crane, who admitted under oath that Patricia had told the board she'd taken care of the notification requirement, but never explained how. Bethany claimed she'd assumed this meant the letters had been properly delivered. The tree service company that had cut down the oak was also deposed. The owner testified that Patricia had called him personally and told him she needed a tree removed from an HOA common area. She'd shown him my property and pointed out the tree, claiming the HOA owned the land. He'd never asked for proof of ownership or permits because HOAs called him all the time to remove trees from common areas. When he'd arrived the morning of the job and realized the tree was clearly on private property, he'd called Patricia to confirm. She'd assured him it was fine and that she had documentation showing HOA ownership of the tree. "Did you ever see that documentation?" Jennifer asked. "No, madam." I took her word for it. I've worked with their HOA before and never had any problems. You normally remove trees from private property without verifying ownership. No, madam. I thought this was different because she was the HOA president and said it was HOA property. I realize now I should have asked for more proof. The trial was scheduled for early September, 6 months after my tree had been cut down. As we got closer to the trial date, Harold Mitchell started making serious settlement offers. First $50,000, then $60,000, then $75,000 plus a written apology, though still no resignation from Patricia. Jennifer advised me that we should push for more. "The evidence is overwhelmingly in your favor," she said. "The fraud, the retaliation, the text messages. A jury is going to be very sympathetic to you and very angry at Patricia. I think we can get a 6-figure judgment, possibly more with punitive damages." I told her to reject the settlement offers. I wanted my day in court. I wanted Patricia to have to sit there and listen to a jury tell her she was wrong. The week before trial, the U.S. Attorney's Office contacted Jennifer. They decided to prosecute Patricia for mail fraud. She was being charged with 3 federal counts, one for each letter she'd fraudulently signed for. Each count carried a maximum of 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Patricia was arraigned 3 days before our civil trial was set to begin. She posted bail and pleaded not guilty, but the criminal charges changed everything about the civil case. Harold Mitchell called Jennifer and asked for an emergency meeting. We met at Jennifer's office. Harold looked tired, and Patricia wasn't with him. "My client is willing to settle for $90,000, Harold said without preamble. $75,000 for the tree and landscaping, $15,000 for legal fees, plus a written apology from the HOA. Patricia will resign as president." $125,000, Jennifer countered. "And the apology comes from Patricia personally, not just the HOA. Plus she's banned from serving on the HOA board in any capacity for at least 10 years. Harold sighed. "I'll take it to my client." He called back 2 hours later. "We'll do $100,000 total, personal apology from Patricia. She resigns and won't serve on the board for 5 years. $115,000 personal apology, resignation, 10-year ban from the board. $110,000 personal apology, resignation, 7-year ban." Jennifer looked at me. I thought about it. The trial would be satisfying, but it would also take at least a week of my time, possibly more. And there was always the risk that a jury would award less than the settlement, though Jennifer didn't think that was likely. "Take it," I said. We signed the settlement agreement the next day. The HOA would pay me $110,000 within 30 days. Patricia would provide a written apology admitting that she'd acted improperly and violated my property rights. She would resign immediately as HOA president and was barred from serving on the board in any capacity for 7 years. If she violated any terms of the agreement, I could reopen the lawsuit and seek additional damages. Patricia's written apology arrived by courier a week later. It was short and clearly written by Harold Mitchell, but it said what it needed to say. She'd acted without proper authority, violated my rights, and caused significant damage to my property. She apologized for her actions. The check arrived 3 days after that. $110,000 from the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. I immediately hired Tom Stevens, the arborist who'd given me the most thorough estimate, to start work on my yard. We selected the largest oak tree his company could source, a 35-year-old specimen from a tree farm in Tennessee. It wasn't anywhere close to what I'd lost, but it was something. The tree cost $42,000 to purchase and transplant, including a year of maintenance to help it establish. Tom's crew also repaired all the damage to my lawn, installed a new irrigation system to help the transplanted oak, and added several other native trees and shrubs to the property. The total landscaping work came to $68,000. That left me with $42,000 after paying for the tree work. I used some of it to pay Jennifer a bonus on top of her fees, which the settlement had covered. She'd earned every penny. The rest went into my savings account. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for March of the following year. The U.S. attorney offered her a plea deal: plead guilty to 1 count of mail fraud, pay a $10,000 fine, serve 6 months of home confinement and 3 years of probation. Patricia rejected the deal and insisted on going to trial. The trial lasted 3 days. I was called as a witness and testified about coming home to find my tree removed and about never receiving the certified letters. The postal inspector testified about Patricia's fraud. The postal worker who'd been working the day Patricia signed for the letters testified that Patricia had claimed to be accepting mail for a neighbor, but hadn't provided any authorization. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found Patricia guilty on all 3 counts of mail fraud. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release after that, and a $50,000 fine. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the post office for the costs of the investigation. Patricia appealed, but the conviction was upheld. She started serving her sentence at a minimum security federal facility in West Virginia in September, almost exactly a year and a half after she'd cut down my tree. The new HOA board, elected after Patricia's resignation, was considerably more reasonable. They revised the CC and Articles to require homeowner consent before the HOA could enter private property for anything other than genuine emergencies. They also implemented new procedures for violation notices, requiring photographic evidence and in-person contact before any enforcement action. My transplanted oak survived its first year and started putting out new growth in its second spring. It would never be the 100-year-old giant I'd lost, but watching it grow was satisfying in its own way. I planted 2 more smaller oaks in my backyard as well, thinking ahead to what the property might look like in 50 or 100 years. Sometimes I'd sit on my porch in the evening and think about Patricia sitting in federal prison, because she'd been so determined to retaliate against me for filing a complaint about her husband's boat. She destroyed a 100-year-old tree, committed multiple federal crimes, cost the HOA over $100,000, destroyed her own reputation, and ended up in prison. All because she couldn't handle someone pointing out that her husband was violating the same rules she was so eager to enforce against everyone else. My neighbor Robert stopped by one evening while I was watering the new oak tree. We stood there watching the water soak into the soil around the root ball. "I heard Patricia got denied parole," Robert said. "She'll have to serve the full 18 months. "I heard that too," I said. "You feel bad about it? Her ending up in prison, I mean." I thought about that question. Did I feel bad? Patricia had destroyed something irreplaceable that had stood for a century, something that had been on my property before the neighborhood existed, before the HOA existed, before Patricia had even been born. She'd done it deliberately, maliciously, to punish me for having the audacity to expect her to follow the same rules everyone else did. She'd compounded that by committing federal crimes to cover her tracks and then lied about it repeatedly. "No," I said finally. "I don't feel bad." She made her choices. She could have admitted what she'd done and settled this quickly. She could have taken the plea deal instead of going to trial. At every step, she chose to double down and make things worse. What happened to her is the consequence of her own decisions. Robert nodded. "That's fair. The neighborhood is a lot more peaceful now anyway. The new board actually listens when people have concerns." That was true. I'd even been asked to join the board myself, but I'd declined. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last me a lifetime. The seasons changed and my new oak tree grew. In the summer, it provided a small circle of shade on my lawn. It would be decades before it was large enough to shade the house like its predecessor had, but that was okay. I'd taken pictures of the new tree every month since it had been planted, documenting its growth. Maybe in 30 or 40 years, I'd be able to show those pictures to someone and tell them the story of how this tree came to be here, replacing the one that Patricia Winters had destroyed. The other lasting change was that I became much more involved in local property rights issues. I joined a county-wide group that advocated for reforming HOA laws in North Carolina, pushing for more homeowner protections and limits on HOA authority. Our group successfully lobbied for a new state law requiring HOAs to obtain court orders before removing trees over a certain size from private property, even if the CC and Articus claimed to give them that authority. The law was informally known as the Heritage Tree Protection Act, though that wasn't its official name. I testified before the state legislature when they were considering the bill, telling my story about coming home to find my 100-year-old oak cut down. Several other homeowners testified too, with similar stories of HOAs destroying mature trees without permission. The bill passed with strong bipartisan support and was signed into law. Patricia got out of prison after serving 16 months of her 18-month sentence. She and her husband sold their house in Meadowbrook Hills and moved out of state. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they'd moved to Florida, though I never confirmed it and didn't particularly care. The tree service that had cut down my oak tree also faced consequences. Tom Stevens, the arborist who'd helped restore my property, filed a complaint with the North Carolina Board of Examiners of Landscape Contractors. After an investigation, the company's owner was fined and required to take additional training on verifying property ownership and obtaining proper permits before tree removal. The owner also called me personally to apologize, which I appreciated. 2 years after my tree was cut down, I stood in my front yard on a warm spring evening and watched the sun set through the branches of my transplanted oak. The tree had grown noticeably over those 2 years, putting on new height and filling out its canopy. It would never replace what I'd lost, but it was healthy and thriving, and in its own way, it represented something important. You don't get to destroy other people's property just because you have a little bit of power. And if you try, there are consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Chen. I hadn't heard from her in several months, not since she'd sent me some final paperwork related to the case. The message read, "Saw the news about the Heritage Tree Protection Act being used for the first time in Wake County. Homeowner successfully blocked HOA from removing old magnolia. Thought you'd want to know your case is still making a difference." I smiled and texted back my thanks. The case had cost me a 100-year-old tree that could never be truly replaced. But if the result was that other people's heritage trees were protected, maybe something good had come out of it after all. My new oak tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, its leaves rustling. Birds had started nesting in it this spring, just a few at first, but they were there. In the backyard, the 2 smaller oaks I'd planted were also flourishing. In 50 years, or 75, or 100, maybe someone would stand where I was standing and appreciate these trees the way I'd appreciated the one that came before them. Maybe they'd never know the story of how they came to be planted, or maybe they would. Either way, the trees would be here, growing, providing shade and shelter and beauty, long after all the players in this drama were gone. The HOA sent out its monthly newsletter the next day. The new president, a retired teacher named Margaret Foster, who actually seemed to care about making the neighborhood better rather than accumulating power, had written a message about community and mutual respect. There was no mention of enforcement actions or violations or threats. It was a stark contrast to Patricia's tenure, where every newsletter had included a list of properties in violation and warnings about fines and liens. I took my coffee out to the porch that Saturday morning and read through the newsletter. There was information about the neighborhood pool opening for summer, a reminder about the 4th of July block party, and a request for volunteers to help maintain the common areas. Normal, reasonable neighborhood stuff. Robert walked by with his dog and stopped to chat. "Hey, Steven, you going to the pool opening next weekend?" "Probably. I've got some old colleagues visiting from Colorado, might bring them by." "Good deal. Hey, I wanted to tell you my daughter is in law school now at UNC. She read about your case in one of her property law classes. It's in the textbook as an example of HOA overreach," I laughed. "Seriously?" "Yep, there's a whole section on it. She called me all excited because she recognized the neighborhood name. I told her you were my neighbor." "That's wild. I never thought I'd end up in a law school textbook." "Well, you made quite the impact. Patricia too, though not the kind she was hoping for." Robert's dog pulled at the leash, eager to continue the walk. "I'll let you get back to your coffee. See you at the pool opening." I watched him walk away, then turned my attention back to my yard. The landscaping Tom had done was fully established now. Native wildflowers bloomed along the borders, attracting butterflies and bees. The grass was thick and green. The new oak tree stood as a centerpiece, still young but strong and healthy. The property value had actually increased, despite losing the original oak. The professional landscaping and the new trees had more than made up for it in the eyes of appraisers. When I'd had the house reappraised for insurance purposes, it had come in $25,000 higher than before the oak was removed. The insurance appraiser had specifically noted the quality of the landscaping and the investment in multiple native trees as value adds. So in the end, Patricia's vindictive action had cost her HOA $110,000 in settlement money, cost her personally $50,000 in criminal fines plus 18 months in prison, destroyed her reputation, forced her to move out of the neighborhood, and actually increased my property value. Meanwhile, I had a beautifully landscaped yard with multiple growing trees and the satisfaction of knowing I'd stood up for my rights and won. The legal victory had changed something in me too. Before all this happened, I'd been the type to avoid conflict, to go along to get along. When I'd filed that original complaint about Patricia's husband's boat in their driveway, it had taken me weeks to work up the nerve to do it. I'd almost talked myself out of it multiple times. Now, I understood the importance of standing up when something wrong happened. Not being aggressive or unreasonable, but being willing to push back when someone abused their power or violated your rights. That lesson had value beyond just the specific situation with the tree. I'd applied it at work too. 3 months ago, my manager had tried to take credit for a project I'd led. Old me would have stayed quiet and let it happen. New me had calmly but firmly corrected the record in a meeting with senior leadership, presenting documentation of my work. My manager had backpedaled quickly, and I'd received proper recognition for the project. I ended up getting promoted partly based on that work. The summer passed peacefully. The neighborhood pool parties were friendly and relaxed. The new HOA board focused on actual community building rather than enforcement and control. I started dating someone I'd met at the pool, a woman named Tracy Foster who was Margaret Foster's daughter and taught high school biology in Charlotte. She found my tree story fascinating from a botanical perspective and had actually used it as a teaching example in her class when discussing the importance of protecting old-growth trees and native species. By autumn, my oak tree was showing beautiful fall color, its leaves turning golden and red. I raked them carefully and used them as mulch around the base of the tree, feeding nutrients back into the soil. Tom had taught me about proper tree care during all the work he'd done, and I'd become something of an amateur arborist myself. The criminal justice system moved slowly, but Patricia's appeals finally ran out in November. Her conviction and sentence were final. I got a notification from the victim witness coordinator at the U.S. Attorney's Office letting me know the case was closed. I sat on my porch that evening, 2.5 years after coming home to find my oak tree in pieces, and reflected on everything that had happened. The anger I'd felt that day had long since faded, replaced by satisfaction at the outcome and appreciation for the lessons I'd learned. The legal system had worked, slowly but effectively. Justice had been served, both civil and criminal. My phone rang. It was Jennifer Chen. "Stephen, I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to let you know that I'm being interviewed next week by a national legal magazine about HOA law and reform. They want me to discuss your case. I wanted to make sure you were okay with that." "Of course," I said. "If talking about what happened can help other people, I'm all for it." "Great. I'm also writing an article for the North Carolina Bar Association Journal about the Heritage Tree Protection Act and the cases that led to it. Would you be willing to be interviewed for that?" "Sure. Whatever helps." We talked for a few more minutes about the details, and then I hung up and went back to enjoying the evening. The air was cool and crisp, perfect autumn weather. Through the branches of my oak tree, I could see stars starting to appear in the darkening sky. A car pulled up in front of my house. Tracy got out, carrying a bag from our favorite Thai restaurant. We'd been dating for 4 months now, and it was getting serious. She'd been there through the end of the legal case, celebrating with me when Patricia's final appeal was denied. "I brought dinner," she said, climbing the porch steps and kissing me hello. "And I have news. The science department is doing a whole unit on trees and ecosystems this year, and I got approval to bring my students on a field trip to some heritage tree sites around Charlotte. I was hoping we could include your yard as one of the stops. not to focus on the drama, but to talk about tree transplanting, recovery, and the importance of protecting mature trees. "I'd be honored," I said. "When were you thinking?" "Probably next spring, after your oak has leafed out again. I want the students to see it healthy and growing." We went inside and ate dinner, talking about her day at school and my day at work, normal relationship stuff. But there was something profound about the fact that what had started as one of the worst experiences of my life had led to meaningful legal reform, had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, and had even played a role in how I'd met the woman I was now seriously dating. Later that night, after Tracy had gone home, I went back out to the porch one last time. The neighborhood was quiet, most houses dark. A few security lights cast pools of illumination on driveways and sidewalks. My oak tree was a dark silhouette against the night sky, its bare branches reaching upward. In a few months, those branches would bud again. Leaves would unfurl, birds would nest, and the tree would continue its slow, patient growth. In 10 years, it would be significantly larger. In 20 or 30, it would be a substantial presence in the yard. In 50 or 100 years, if I took care of it, and whoever owned this house after me took care of it, it might approach the magnificence of the tree that had been lost. That was the thing about trees. They operated on a different timescale than human drama and conflict. Patricia's spite and vindictiveness had seemed so important to her in the moment, important enough to commit crimes and destroy something irreplaceable. But trees didn't care about HOA politics or personal vendettas. They just grew, season after season, year after year, outlasting the petty concerns of the people who lived around them. The original oak had stood for a century, through world wars and economic depressions, through countless changes in the neighborhood and the city around it. It had provided shade and beauty and shelter to generations of birds and squirrels and people. Patricia had destroyed it in a morning, but even that act of destruction hadn't been the end of the story. New trees were growing. Laws had been changed. People had learned lessons. I went inside and went to bed, satisfied with how things had turned out. Patricia Winters had tried to hurt me, had succeeded in destroying something I valued, and had ended up destroying herself instead. The tree she'd cut down was gone forever, but the consequences of her actions would echo forward for years in the form of legal reforms, protected trees, and my own personal growth. Justice had been served, slowly but thoroughly. My tree was gone, but Patricia had paid the price. $110,000 to me, $50,000 in criminal fines, 18 months in federal prison, a criminal record that would follow her for life, forced relocation, and a reputation destroyed. She tried to wield the power of the HOA as a weapon against me, and it had backfired spectacularly. As for me, I had a beautifully landscaped yard, a healthy growing oak tree, a relationship with an amazing woman, a promotion at work, and the knowledge that I'd stood up for my rights and won. Patricia had cut down my tree, and she'd paid for replacement plus landscaping plus legal fees, exactly as promised. And then some. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, listening to the wind rustling through the branches of my new oak tree outside my bedroom window. Everything had turned out exactly as it should have.